Hey, Tim Bushong here. Eschatology matters, and it does. Just a reminder for the upcoming conference, How Shall We Then Live, September 8th and 9th at Maple Grove Church in Topeka. Go to the Eventbrite page and register. You don't want to miss this. Also, if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit the bell for notifications. And here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome along. This is Pastor Tim Bushong for Eschatology Matters. And with me today is an old friend, a dear friend, a muscular friend for whom I would not want to meet a back alley if he's having a bad day. No, just kidding. This is Pastor Andrew Isker from Minnesota. Welcome, Andrew.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me, Tim.
I'm glad to. The first question right out of the gate. Do you think eschatology matters?
Well, as a matter of fact, I do. Yes.
Oh, well, then I guess we're done.
All right. Well, it's a great episode. Thank you for having me.
Wow, they covered a lot of ground on that. No, this started off as a conference, and then, of course, we all got noodled into contributing to the YouTube channel. Now I've got my own little playlist, and believe it or not, it's called Postmillennialism with Tim Bushong. How can that be? I don't even baptize babies. How can I be a postmillennialist?
Oh,
now why is that? Why is that funny? I mean, you can be honest. You can be transparent.
No, I don't think. I think it's I mean, most post-mill people, not all, but most of them are very into covenant theology and into Presbyterianism or Reformed theology, but there certainly is overlap of Reformed Baptists for sure. I mean, a lot of, especially lately, it seems like a lot more 1689 Baptists are thinking through these issues, especially because they depart from sort of the it seems like the default evangelical mode, which is just dispensationalism and premillennialism. And so since they depart from them in a number of other ways,
we like to say that they departed from us.
Well, yeah, okay. I agree. Okay. I agree that they did. Yeah, we could get into the whole history. I mean, actually, that's one of the chapters in the book that I did with Torba. I went through the whole history of dispensationalism. I mean, so many people, and we made it. We wanted to have a book that was written for the average layman in the pews. It was not. I mean, that was the criticism. Of course, we got was, why is this book so short, and why is the font so big? And things
well,
like that.
Let me tell you,
regular people. That's why
the other book, the one that's making all the rounds and getting all the criticism, it's the polar opposite. It's for the wonky academic in the abstract, not even taking into consideration us blue collar schmoes out here in the hinterlands. It's no. And
well, that's exactly it. It's and we kind of, I mean, it's not like we coordinated it and said, okay, Stephen, you do the nerd talk and we'll talk to the regular people. But that's kind of how it shook out is, we weren't writing for academics. We weren't going to put in a million footnotes. We weren't going to have real complex arguments. But we wanted to speak to a lot of people about this issue, and a lot of regular people who, especially regular Christians in the pews, who see the things that are going on in America today, and they instinctively know things are not right. They're Christians, and they've been told their whole lives that, well, you can't let your faith interfere with politics, or politics interfere with your faith. You got to keep them separate. But they know for whatever reason, like that roadblock or whatever is not holding them back nearly as much anymore. And as a result, they're approaching politics as Christians without having been discipled in it, without having anybody teaching them, here's how you do it. Here's how Christians engaged in politics for millennia. So some of it is like they have to fly by the seat of their pants, and they have a lot of people have good instincts, I think. And so what our whole purpose in the book really is to just defend those people, say that, no, there's nothing wrong with you caring about the state of your nation as a Christian. That's a good impulse. That's the right impulse. This is natural,
right? Yes, to be a Christian. So tell the folks a little bit about the book and your relationship with a man named Andrew Torba.
Yes.
We'll be working our way back into your history at some point, but
of course,
for right now, this is very, very present and prescient. Tell us.
Yeah. So, I, got connected with Torba about, a year and a half ago online, and it was actually over, Eschatology. I remember he posted something where he was like, hey, everyone send me, content on the Olivet Discourse. Right. And, I had like 2 weeks earlier, I had just begun preaching on Matthew 24. And so I sent him, my most recent sermon on Matthew 24. And, I was at that time really small Twitter account. He had a big Twitter account. And so I just thought, it probably won't see this. I'll just take a shot in the dark. Maybe he will, maybe not. And, about 20 minutes later, it was a 45-minute sermon. And like almost, 22 and a half minutes later, I get a DM and it said, that was one of the best sermons I've ever heard in my entire life. And it was, from Torba, and he listened to it on 2 times speed. And I already talk pretty fast. So, I mean, that tells you, the guy's pretty high IQ. He could process information pretty quickly. And so anyway, then he went back that night, went back and listened to, the sermon before that on chapter 23, or a couple sermons on chapter 23. And it's like, these are great. These are excellent. And so he, after that, he, said, well, you should contribute to our blog, to Gap News and things like that. And so I started, contributing there. And this last summer, as Christian nationalism was just, became a big talking point in the election. Mm-hmm. Because they just wanted to slander Christians. They wanted to lump Christians in with white nationalists, white supremacists, yes, and everything. So they want there to be this overlap in the term. And, we saw like right through it. Obviously, they want to demonize Christians. And here's tens of millions of evangelical Christians who voted for Donald Trump and I know so bad. We could even talk about that because you were at my ordination, and that was a question during my exam. We can talk about that later. Remind me to bring that up.
Oh, don't worry. We're bringing that up, buddy. That's a good point.
Anyway, so there's tens of millions of Christians that supported Trump, that something's kind of fishy about what happened on, election night in 2020. And things like that. And they want to, just especially recently, just in like the last week, Joe Biden is like, the greatest terrorist threat in America is white supremacists and white nationalists. And it's like, there's like maybe a few hundred of them, and most of them are employed by the FBI.
What? When I heard that, I thought, now listen, Joe, a couple campgrounds near Owensboro, Kentucky does not a movement make.
That's right. That's right.
Man.
Yeah, and we're paying for them with our tax dollars.
Yeah, did you see that parade? And they got the shields. And nobody bought it. Nobody bought it.
No, everyone's like, these are all feds. This is ridiculous. Yep. All these things. I mean, some people actually say, well, these guys maybe aren't, but it's neither here nor there. I don't. It's such a small, like, that's never going to be a thing. As much as they try to gin that stuff up. I mean, just like the Michigan militia that tried to kidnap the governor. It was like 9 out of 12 of them were informants. I mean, it's just so ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, it really is it's a strange era, and part of me goes, it's almost like what Schaeffer said about legal proceedings in the 70s and 80s. He says, I think I have a right to ask, where were the Christian attorneys? It was like everyone checked out. And speaking of eschatology, I mean, there's a lot of defining success out of existence, even to this day, among people that aren't necessarily, fans of Left Behind or the late great Planet Earth. And I think there's a reason for that, because once you start poking the sleeping dog in the corner, he's going to lash out, right? I mean, that's what's happening now. It's what's happening with not just Antifa, but in a lot of different situations. So you've kind of teamed up with Andrew. You're writing for Gab. This is great. We need a platform that's not constantly under threat. What's the recent? I don't know if it's recent or not, but do you want to find out who the God is of a society? Find out who you can't criticize.
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. What do accounts, on Twitter and Facebook, even Twitter with Elon Musk, like it's still, they're still banning people. What can't you say? What can't you say on YouTube?
Yeah.
What can't you say everywhere else? And it's a very, narrow set of parameters of things you can't say and who you can.
And it seems to be kind of arbitrary too. It's dynamic. It'll change from person to person. So tell us how your commitments to an optimistic eschatology. You just mentioned Matthew 24. Mm-hmm. I preached a series called Victory in Jesus. Can you guess what position I took in that series? But tell us a little bit about how your belief in a successful gospel this side of human history helps you not only as a Christian dealing in the greater world, but even as a pastor in what's the town?
Waseca,
right.
Minnesota. Yeah, very small town. 9,324, I think, is the current population. So not very big.
My town's even smaller. But here's the key. It's home.
Exactly. Yeah, I was born and raised here. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So how does postmillennialism help Andrew Isker through his day-to-day pastoral responsibilities?
Well, I think, it would be, some of it is just thinking about what it would be like if I wasn't optimistic about long-term success of the gospel. It would be impossible. I don't know how the pessimistic guys do it. I guess I can understand why they get burned out so easily and they, bounce from church to church all the time and don't stick around in places and leave ministry so often. It's because, in a place like this, like gospel ministry in small towns is very difficult. It's very hard because you have a lot of people who think because they got confirmed at the Lutheran Church when they were 14, that they, or the Catholic Church or wherever, they're definitely going to heaven, and that they believe in God, but they don't live like Christians at all. And so it's very difficult to get people to understand. No, you actually have to believe, here's what the Bible says. You have to believe it. Mm-hmm. And you need to believe all of it. And you need to understand what it's saying. You need to repent and believe. You need to fully commit yourself to Jesus. And a lot of people don't want to do that. They'd much rather just do what they're doing. But obviously that's like everywhere. But in small towns, I think it's really entrenched. In rural areas like this, really entrenched in this way of life where churches and part of it too is the perception that people have of the kind of people that I'm ministering to, is that church doesn't really matter to their day-to-day life. And on one hand, it's somewhat of a justified belief because of how, the church has operated. And whether it's evangelical churches or your Lutheran, your fairly conservative Lutheran churches or whatever else, it's totally disconnected from real day-to-day life. One of the things that people say when they come and listen to my sermons is how much application to real stuff that they see every day that I'm able to make. I can connect 2 Samuel to things going on in our world today.
Right.
And people don't do that. They don't do that, or it's always just really abstract theological concepts, stuff like that, where it's totally divorced from, practical day-to-day living in current year, which is a mess.
Right. And then the preacher says, now in closing, may the Spirit apply these truths to each of our hearts. Let us pray.
Yeah. It's like, well, figure it out for yourself, basically.
Right. Right. Exactly.
But don't apply it to politics because that's very bad.
Well, there's the third rail of ecclesiology.
Yeah.
Is that now, since Jesus is king, king's got a kingdom.
Yes.
What is his kingdom?
His kingdom is every square inch of the whole world. And it's, that is such a hard thing for people to grab hold of. But once they do, then it's like, the light bulb comes on and they realize, no, Jesus is king over everything. Whether you submit to him or not, he is the king. Right. If you don't submit to him, you're just committing treason against the king.
Right.
And he's not going to like it. He doesn't like it, and things are not going to go well long term for you. So I mean, some of it is along those lines. I mean, I say this all the time. I can't remember who said it. It might have been the recently departed Tim Keller, actually, which I'm not, often quoting Tim Keller or praising him. But I think it was him, maybe Carl Truman, one of those kind of guys. They from time to time, they say things that are good and correct. The real big apologetic challenge of the contemporary era is not proving that Christianity is true, but proving that it matters. I think that is where we've failed so much. And so much of it, I think, is because we have this pessimistic eschatology that leads into a sort of a quasi-Gnosticism where, well, this world doesn't really matter. This world is not my home. It's all going to get burned up anyway. Yeah. And so then you don't think long term. You don't think about, your children and your grandchildren in the world that you're building for them. And in whatever way, I mean, it could be building wealth to pass on to them, or it could be building up, businesses that they can inherit and take over. It could just be setting them up for success, to be able to have careers and have good lives. It can be, just opening the gates to people who want to destroy civilization, like we've done. And I mean, it can be all of these things, and it has been all these things. And so, that I mean is largely what I try to communicate and get across to people, but it's really difficult. It's really hard. There are a lot of my success, that I've had over the last few years since I started ministering again, in this town has been, just connecting with people who are evangelical Christians that care about, contemporary political and cultural issues, connecting with them. And almost all of them, when I first meet them, when I first get to know folks, they're almost all premillennial. That's just the default position that they have, is that the rapture's coming soon, that we're in the end times now. And I don't blame them for thinking that way, because things are really bad. Way worse than they were in like 1988 when Hal Lindsey or whoever was writing Jesus is coming, 88 reasons Jesus is coming back, and how
Edgar Wise in it.
Yeah, and then Hal Lindsey's Late Great Planet Earth and all those things. Like when they were writing those books, things were pretty good for America at that time, comparatively. I mean, it was bad. The decline was real, already happening. Yeah. It was just going down like that instead of straight down off the cliff. It wasn't we're at the top part of the exponential curve.
Exactly. It's not a slippery slope. Now it's a greased pole with no handles anywhere. I mean,
that's right.
I was born in 1960 and grew up in the church, and we had the 7 charts on the wall and a very heavy emphasis on how this is all going to play out. Newspaper in one hand, Bible in the other, and there's locusts and helicopters, Mm-hmm. And I remember my own journey from that to a full-blown, full-orbed post-millennial and general equity theonomy. I don't think you can have one without the other. But so in your small town, which, by the way, in the summertime, our town is a little bigger, but that's only because we had the largest natural lake in Indiana. We got so many lakes, we might as well be Minnesota without the winter. So walk us through where you came from, because just so the folks know, our relationship goes back to when I was a pastor in the CREC. It was one of the, I think, the only Reformed Baptist pastors in the whole group.
At that time,
for a while.
Was some more.
Yeah, there's some more now. Yeah. Yuri Brito always says, well, you were the sole Baptist, now you're my favorite. But thank you, brother. But I was tasked with chairing your ordination exam. Yes. And if you remember, the first time we didn't pass you, but I did get a hold of you right after that, right? Remember the the phone call? Mm-hmm. And I think I remember saying, read less Jordan and Lightheart and read more Andrew Murray and R.C. Sproul. It was something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
But to be honest, I knew in my heart, you're gonna pastor someday. This is gonna happen. Mm-hmm. And at the time, there were some other things going on in the background. And I was also on a committee examining a couple churches and how they'd handled some really just bad cases. Who wants to revisit that stuff, you know?
Yeah.
But frankly, at the time, there was an awful lot of emphasis, even in that denomination, with tone, how you say things, how you present.
Yes.
And if you remember, we caught up last year at the County Before Country, and it was just so good to see you and Kara.
Oh yeah.
And your cute little youngest. What cheeks.
Yeah. She still got them.
Still got them. Okay. Good. So you're a young father. How old are you, by the way?
I just this month I turned 37. I was telling everybody I was 38 because I miscounted. I did the math wrong.
Well, public education.
That's right. I went to public school, so I'm so good at math. So yeah, 38 or 37.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. And how long have you guys been married?
Oh man, let's see. We will be married 13 years.
Very good. Very good. So you're planning not only for your family's future, but trying to bring this smallish. I mean, was it like 40 on a Lord's Day, 50?
Yeah, real small church. Yeah.
Boy, I remember when I came here to Syracuse Baptist, there's a long period between the original 11 members. Ooh, there's a prospect, and breaking the 50 ceiling.
Yeah.
That was like a big deal. And from what I understand in Southern Baptist circles, that is a big deal.
Yeah, when you get past 50. Yeah.
Now we're like, we can't, we have people standing at the door. We're sorry, we're full. You have to go home now. No, we're not there, but we're in overflow land, and God's been really good. So when you were growing up, was the default position in your Christian background dispensational premillennialism?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, I didn't study it a ton. Everyone, you'd go to church camp or you'd go to, youth group or whatever. People were reading Left Behind books and things like that. And that was just in the background. Everyone's like, well, the end times are coming. The rapture is going to come. Be ready for it. And
by the way, things couldn't get any worse. I don't see how they could get worse.
Yeah. It's like, don't say that. Don't ever say that.
Hold my Fresca.
Yeah, it could get worse.
It could get
Java car.
Yeah, right.
They could get worse for sure. That was more or less the default position that everyone had. And I was not even aware until college, till I was 1 year old. I was not even aware that there were any other alternatives to that. I just assumed this is the only possibility. This is the only way to read the Bible. And so the first time I was probably, about 20 years old when I started going to a PCA church, and the pastor there was just dumped a bunch of books on me because I was eager to learn, and gave me all these books to read. A few of them were on post-millennial eschatology. And then I remember watching some, and this is very early in the like YouTube era, watching some, YouTube videos of Doug Wilson preaching on eschatology and, and, I think, what else did I see? There was something, it was maybe his debate with Christopher Hitchens, where there were a lot of, like preterist interpretations that he brought out.
Collision.
Yeah. In that debate. And so it was, I was like, wow, this is, wait, there's a way to where Jesus is not defeated and the world is not just giving up on the world, that we shouldn't be pessimistic and think that the world is doomed, but he's actually conquering it. Wow. That's, you're telling me that for the first time. Like that was that was my reaction. Like, wow, this is great.
Right.
Wow. And so I started to jump in, head first on all of that. And then, I mean, for the first time, Matthew 24, for instance, made sense. Where there's an interpretation to it where it's like, well, oh, he's talking about what happened in 70 AD. This makes way more sense.
And generation means generation for the first time ever.
I know, like that. So much of it. I mean, for me, it was always. I mean, this is how I came to like Calvinism too, which is also not the default position within evangelicalism.
Right.
And I remember someone saying, when I was in Campus Crusade in college, I was on a summer project, and there was this Reformed Baptist, young guy from Indiana, and he said,
"Yay, Reformed Baptist from Indiana!"
Yeah, I know. Great guy. I lost touch with him, but he was a fantastic fella. Went to Ball State, and he said, "Well, he didn't," because people were always arguing, and I'm like, I don't really want to, argue this stuff. And he's like, "Well, you don't have to argue. Just read Romans chapter 9 and pray about it, and read it a couple times and just meditate on it. Think about what God is saying there." And I read it, and I didn't want to believe it.
Yeah, and I can't mean that. No,
and I can't possibly mean that. But when you're honest, with yourself and with the scripture, I mean, you can always you always know when you're being dishonest and you're trying to shoehorn something that isn't really there. And I can't do that. I cannot bring myself to just believe something that isn't true.
Well,
I'm not schizophrenic enough to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so I'm reading and I'm like, I think I have to be a Calvinist because, Romans 9 is saying what it says, and there's just really no other. I mean, I could try to do some mental gymnastics to hop around and make it say what I want, but it says what it says.
Says what it says.
And you just got to deal with it. And then I had to think through. I mean, I remember it was almost like an epiphany one day where I'm like, oh, you know what? Nobody deserves to be saved. And so if God selects even one person to be saved, that's totally sheer grace. And we don't deserve. And that's way better than this idea that somehow deep down, I kind of deserve it. I kind of deserve a fair shot. When it's like, no, I'm a sinner in rebellion against God. I don't deserve anything. And the fact that he would show me this grace is unbelievable. And so it was just this radical transformation in my thinking. And so because of that, then when I encountered this alternative reading of Matthew 24 and really the whole New Testament, then it really starts to make sense. Then you read the Psalms. You read how the New Testament quotes the Psalms, and it's like, oh, that makes more sense if we think about it, that way.
Yeah.
This optimistic thing. If you read, I mean, I remember, going through Hebrews, because I remember at one point in college, someone was like, oh, Hebrews is just too hard. You shouldn't even read it because it's really hard to understand.
You get it wrong.
Yeah. And I took that as a challenge. I'm like, no, I'm going to figure this out. And,
hold my Fresca.
Yes.
Again.
And so I'm reading through it and studying it and looking up. I did the thing that Doug Wilson talks about, we see the Old Testament quoted, go back and read the whole passage and then think about the passage in the context that is quoted in the New Testament. Now you understand what that Old Testament passage means. I did that with all the, the beginning of Hebrews, all the Psalms there. And it was like, oh, wow, this is a really post-millennial book. I mean, there's no way to read it other than that. And so, yeah,
I mean, it's so post-millennial that it's talking to Hebrew Christians who are under persecution saying, and don't go back to the temple. There's nothing there because Jesus is reigning. And even if they take your stuff, you're going to win anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
It's that post-millennial.
It's an amazing thing. I mean, just the whole New Testament. I mean, all of these, it made so much more sense too, where it's like something big is going to happen soon. Like that's the, in the background of almost all of the epistles.
Shortly.
Something big is going to go down pretty soon.
Right around the corner.
and liberals take hold of that, unbelieving liberal scholars are like, well, they thought Jesus was coming back sometime in that generation, and they were wrong. And so that's why the Bible's fake. And it's like, wait a second, what if they were right? And you are wrong, and dispensationalists are wrong, that he did come back in the same way that God appeared so many times in the Old Testament, in judgment.
Yeah.
And so, it made so much more sense. I started doing that. I started reading these things, and I knew, okay, this is what God is calling me to do, to preach the Bible, to teach. And so I started looking at seminaries. I went, I was in a PCA church. I was a member there. And so I went and visited Covenant, Theological Seminary in St. Louis. And I wasn't super impressed with it at all. I was, I remember going to, the classes and thinking like, okay, these are going to be real serious, intellectual discussions. And I sat in on these classes and I'm like, this is like not any different than my, Minnesota State University classes. Hardly. I mean, they open with prayer, and that's about the only difference. Like this is pretty weak. And then I visited. I also visited Southern Baptist Seminary because I wasn't fully committed to being Paedo Baptist yet. I hadn't fully solidified my position on those things, and so I was like, well, I'll check this one out. I was impressed with the campus. Beautiful campus. Really bright. I met a few of the bigger name professors there, and that really was impressed with them and just their knowledge of Scripture and things like that. But I'm like, I don't think I want to be in the Southern Baptist Convention. I don't think I can do it because it's a pretty big commitment. Like if you go there, you're in. Like there's no going to some other denomination. Like you're in it, and you're kind of at their mercy. And so then some friends were like, well, there's another option you could take. You could go to Moscow, Idaho. You could go to this thing called Greyfriars Hall that's put on by Christ Church there, which is, like it's equivalent of a seminary education, but you'd kind of be boxed in the Series C. And I thought, well, I'd much rather do that. I don't want to spend $80,000 and go into debt to go be a pastor. And so that was certainly very appealing. And so I went there, and it was excellent. It was wonderful to be studying there, and the education was in the context of the church. I mean, so everything that we did was within the context of pastoral ministry. We were involved in pretty much everything there. I think it was much better model. It could have maybe been a little bit more academic, and they've worked really hard in the last 5-10 years to really push it harder. And then I started serving as assistant in a Series 3 church in Missouri. We were in the same presbytery at the time. So that's right.
That was Christ the King Church in Springfield.
Springfield, yeah. Right. Yep. And that's where you were on the ordination committees, I think, both. So my first time I did, I didn't do as well. I think I was young and not seasoned enough, and not as prepared. I didn't know. I hadn't even seen an ordination exam to see what how ready I needed to be. The first one I ever witnessed was my own.
Okay.
Yeah. So we just didn't have very many of them. There weren't. It's not like it's a much smaller denomination, not like the PCA, where just about every presbytery meeting in some of the bigger presbyteries they have exams.
Yeah.
And so anyway. Second time around it went much better. I just was able to work a lot harder and know what I'm aiming at, really. Right. And so it was the second one. It was funny. This was 20 January of 2017.
Yeah,
is when I passed the exam, and it was right after the 2016 election. And at that time, I'd become, all in, for, Donald Trump getting elected. I was big Trump supporter. And at that time, most of the pastors in the Series C, were like anti-Trump. They were very, or they were, kind of hold their nose and vote for him, cause he's the nominee, but we're not super enthusiastic about it.
And we don't like that woman.
Yeah, because Hillary Clinton was bad. And so one of the questions I got, because I'd been extremely vocal on online about Trump, just largely because he was actually saying right-wing stuff rather than the standard neocon boilerplate that comes from GOP candidates. And so obviously an imperfect vehicle for this, but the message is completely different and in a good way. And so one of the questions is like, well, why were you in such great support of, or such strong support of Donald Trump? Why did you support him so much? Why did you want him to be president? And I think my answer was, well, I really wanted to avoid thermonuclear war with Russia, because I mean, my biggest argument that I made with people was at the last debate in 2016. I think it was like October of 2016. Hillary Clinton said, "Well, we need to set up a no-fly zone in Syria," and then the moderators like, "Well, that means if Russian jets fly into that no-fly zone, you're gonna have to shoot them down." And she's like, "Yeah, we're prepared for that." And it's like,
are you
want to go to war with a nuclear armed nation? Are you insane? And so, I mean, this is our current foreign policy right now.
Yeah,
basically,
it is.
We're in a de facto war with a nuclear power, and people have no idea how just on the razor's edge we are toward for nuclear war. I mean, we're so much closer now than we were even in the Cold War, and so anyway. I'm saying this, and so I mean that got some of the people off of my back. But my argument really was that for me it was when we were in Missouri, it was Super Tuesday in 2016, February I think, and right before, like the day of or day before National Review, Kelly Williamson wrote for them at that time, and he wrote an article entitled "The White Working Class." And his rationale was because, Trump, his biggest support is from the white working class, who all of their jobs have been shipped overseas, that free trade has just gutted the center of the country.
Right.
And they were the biggest supporters of Trump because he was saying we need to repatriate industry, bring all these, jobs back to America so people can have good lives again. And Kevin Williams is like, no, these people just deserve to die. They're trash. We hate them because they're bringing this horrible man into, political prominence. And so I told Kara, I said, because at that point I was a big Ron Paul guy, big, libertarian, kind of guy. And I saw that and I thought, all right, this is the people that I come from. My dad was a truck driver. I can't, my town here it's all white working class people. Those are my people. And this guy, this, fat tub, I mean, it's just an enormous bulb. He looks like he's a member of the Harkonnen family. This guy is telling me my people need to die. No, Kara, we are going to vote for Donald Trump tomorrow in the primary. Both of us are voting for him. I'm going to get more people to go vote for him because he needs to win. And so immediately I'm like, I hate these people. I hate these pundits, these stupid neoconservative pundits. I want them to suffer. And every time he's on the TV where they're just grinding their teeth, and they look like Rachel Maddow on election night. Yeah. I want them to feel that for the next 4 years. And they did. And it was great.
They kind of did, wonderful. Didn't they?
Yeah, it was great. It was fantastic. And so that's a big motivator is that here, my faith bled into my pop. Like there was really there's no like dividing line between what I, believe biblically and how I operate. I mean, it just your theology comes out of your fingertips, right?
In other words, it's like a seamless robe, and Jesus is actually Lord over that. So, if you remember, think about where you were in 2016. I preached a sermon after the election day. I was still at my former church before I came to Syracuse, and I said, "This is a small window, and this isn't." Don't think that there's some victory lap we got to do now. Mm-hmm. I said, basically, I can boil down the reason that I voted for the guy, SCOTUS.
Yeah. Yeah. And look how it turned out.
and all the libertarian fiber of my being was like, well, I wish we didn't have to think of it in those terms because we're supposed to have a constitutional republic. Well, get real. That hasn't
dead.
That's been a live letter since what, 50? Well, maybe. Okay, 65. 1865.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting in trouble now.
Yeah, now we will. Yeah, we're gonna get.
So think about this. We were being asked to justify a positive vote for someone whose ethical and moral character did not reflect the vast majority of us as Christians.
Yeah.
All right. And that was a big thing. How can you do this? We got Russell Moore, Christianity Today, Gospel Coalition, 9 Marks, on and on and on.
Yeah.
Didn't he govern much better than he campaigned?
I think it well, yes and no.
Up until 20.
There were obvious, well-known failures that he had. I mean, some of them I grade him on a curve. And people don't like hearing that. They're like, "Oh, you're just in his camp and you're just Kool-Aid drinker and things like that." And it's like, well, no, I think I try to approach it honestly and look at the actual realities that we're operating within, that there's a regime that has a tremendous amount of power, that and if the presidency, which nominally has a lot of power, is not aligned with the permanent government, he's very limited in what he can do. Yeah. And then on top of that, the number of people that can staff his administration that would be loyal to his political program were incredibly few. Yeah, that's right. Very, very few. And people are like, well, why did he have Jared Kushner do everything? Like, Jared Kushner screwed so much stuff up. And it's like, yeah, he did, definitely did. But the reason why is because loyalty is the coin of the realm. And he knew that the guy who's married to his daughter is going to be more loyal to him than, Reince Priebus or something. Or all the other, GOP, hacks, dorks that are, that made up his administration. And so I look at it, I think, he more or less did about the best he could. I feel like, well, why did he hire Christopher Wray, or why didn't he fire Fauci? Why did he do these things? People don't realize that, the BLM riots, the mostly peaceful riots are taking place.
Nothing to fear. Go about your business.
Mostly peaceful riots are going on. And the Joint Chiefs of Staff send him a letter. General Milley, right? He was shaped like a bowling ball. Yeah. He sends a letter to Donald Trump that says, if you send the military out against these rioters, we will remove you from office. They're just flat out. I mean, and so if this were any other country, there's a term that we would use for what occurred there.
It's a fruit that you have to peel.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It was a coup. It was a coup d'état that took place. Yeah. I mean, a soft coup, where they threatened it. They said, we'll frog march you out of this place, if you order us to use the military. So he's not in command. And the other thing is, they just flat out lied to him about how many troops were in Syria.
Sure.
We had tons of special forces there, and they told him, oh, they're all gone. Nobody there anymore. Literally, that is by definition treason, what they committed when they lied to the commander in chief about troop levels somewhere. They should have gone to prison for that. But they don't, because the regime has this power. There's tremendous power in the regime. And when the American people, happen to elect someone that is representing the American people, opposed to the regime,
those working class that need to die,
that they want to get rid of, then look what happens. You're going to have a president who isn't able to accomplish very much. And that's why, even the contemporary politics stuff, where people are like, well, we should just get DeSantis in there because he knows how to govern. And it's like, well, that's cool and all, but he is on a very short leash because he is reliant upon donors. Everything that he does, it comes because of the donor. And now he's able to work well in Florida because the governor of Florida doesn't have to deal with the FBI and doesn't have to deal with the State Department, doesn't have to deal with all these things. He actually has real power that he can wield. But you go to Washington, D.C., you can't just fire the whole FBI. I mean, you could try. I mean, I hope Trump wins in 2024 somehow and just fires them all, and not just fires, but like fires them into the sun. And
so
they all need to go.
Think about this in the context of our calling, our vocation as pastors in local church. Bring it back to that.
Yeah.
So many people feel helpless, and they either check out or they get embittered, which that's what a tyrant does. Read your Proverbs. It's all through there. The people groan under the jackboot heel. So when you think about the American experience, because we're both Americans, let's not deny who we are, right?
Of course not.
I can't relate to being an evangelical in Argentina. I don't know what that's like because I don't live there.
Yeah.
And you were talking earlier about going back to your home. I never left here. All those years on the road, Christian music, traveling all over the States and even into South America and Europe and stuff. I always lived where I grew up, and it's just a great comfort. Oh. There are pockets. I think there are pockets of normalcy that I don't think they're going to leave alone. But as far as 2023 goes, these are still great opportunities for normal, regular, law-abiding, put up a fence, bale hay, go pound out rivets people can continue to occupy. And I think that's the theme of the County Before Country that Michael Foster is involved with. We're hearing it a lot, even from our friend John Harris, Conversations That Matter, Localism. What do you see as far as, and see, what I was going to bring up earlier was, you're talking about Trump. It's not about the man. It's about the ideas. It's about the policies of not getting so extended and involved. And by the way, Caesar will have no God before it either. That challenge of Jesus is Lord it's still out there. The gauntlet is thrown. Christians can't run. We don't have anywhere to go, even though both you and I live in these little pockets of normalcy. I call it the Shire. That's right.
For now, it's the Shire. Right. But I mean, the orcs are coming. The orcs are here. Some of it too is like just social media and media in general still occupies people's minds even here. So I don't know if you're seen like the Yellowstone meme, but that's a real thing. Like so it's Kevin Costner sitting on his truck, and it's anytime like you'll see like conservative rural people say, well, we just need to live and let live and put up with the libs, and if they want to do homosexuality and all that stuff, well, that's fine. We're all Americans, and blah blah blah. And it's like that's like the attitude that these people have, and it's all over the place. But it's particularly in rural areas. You have people that think that way, where it's like, it's not a big deal. Like, if wokeness is happening, well, that's
that's on them.
If my daughter decides to become a man, then I'll still love him. Like that's the attitude that it happens. And these places are coming under attack in this way. I mean, even in my own town, this is the case. I mean, you can go to these small towns and you'll see people with pronouns, and it's multicolored hair and things like that.
Which in and of themselves, these are placeholders for other issues that are not just maladies, but these are pathologies socially, which I think has been, okay, let me put my tinfoil hat away for now, but there's about 100-year indoctrination process through the government schools to have people think in a certain way. You remember the film A Christmas Story?
Yeah.
One of my favorites, it takes place in Northwest Indiana, and we get pretty bad winters sometimes too. I'll never forget. I think the scene that reminds me of how Pavlov dog we've become. Flick has got his tongue stuck to the. What do we do? And Ralphie goes, I don't know. The bell rang. But what about I don't know. The bell rang, and they all just head off to school, and Fuck screams his head off.
Yeah.
That was us in 2020 and 21 and 22.
The bell's ringing. Yeah.
The bells were, well, we got to go. We can't help this guy, right?
Yeah. We got to put on our masks. We got to lock down. We got to do everything we've been told to. I mean, we've been beaten into submission. And then the people you thought were your friends, the guys who said, "Oh yeah, I hold to all 5 points of Calvinism," they were over there with this chapter taken in Romans and basically interpreted in the most narrow, small, fractional way and saying, Romans 13. Yeah, you
got to submit. You got to submit.
By
the way, is Nero obligated to submit to Romans 13 too?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, they don't have, they've never thought through the capacity of having to deal with actual tyranny. That's not even within the paradigm that they operate. And that was always my thing when this was going on, when you have these reform guys. Well, we just need to submit. I would say, well, what would you say to Christians living in the Soviet Union, right? What would you tell them?
Mm-hmm.
Would you tell them, just submit? The Soviets are going to starve you to death, and they don't care if you die. What do you do there? Do you just submit to it, or do you bribe people? Do you do whatever you have to survive, even if it's somewhat illicit? And the answer, of course, obviously, you survive this hellish dystopia under tyranny. That's you do what you have to. I mean, you do what Gideon was doing. Everyone criticizes Gideon in Judges for threshing the grain in secret. It's like, well, no, that's what you do to survive when they're going to come and steal it all from you. So that is always it always drove me nuts seeing these guys. And these moments happen where you realize, okay, these are the people who, when the rubber meets the road, who is going to come out well, and who's going to show weakness. You see these, sometimes you're surprised by it a little bit. Sometimes you're not at all. And I mean, there were a lot of disappointments in 2020, although there were several bright spots as well. I mean, we bring up, John MacArthur. Well, I mean, despite, very pessimistic eschatology, I mean, there was the video that went around a week or two ago of we lose down here and things like that. But he was a man, and the guys there were showed real virtue in the face of tyranny, and they stood up in a horrible, I mean, really the worst state in America, probably. I mean, there's a few contenders, but California, I think, is number one.
They have no shame,
and they just stood up and said, "No, we are not. This isn't one. It's our right as Americans, and two, this is what God has commanded us to do." And we will do it, and we will submit to God before we submit to you. And I just started pastoring in the church here after the lockdowns ended. But I could confidently say that, and I told everyone in the church. I mean, it's a small church, so you can get away with more things. But I said if there are future lockdowns, we are not closing our doors. And I'll tell the sheriff, you can arrest me, and then you can arrest the guy that fills in for me next week, and you can keep arresting us until we have 0 people here. And go ahead and do it, because we are going to obey God. We are going to do what God has called us to do. And that has to be at the forefront. That has to be what we do. And people will call you radical. They'll call you a Christian nationalist, and they'll call you all these, smears or whatever. But it doesn't matter. Yeah. Who cares?
What I thought one of the least self-reflective statements I heard in the last 2 months over this particular debate was the idea that, well, let's not use a term that has so much potential for being a flashpoint. Well, guess what? Have you heard some pastors say, let's not use the word Christian because it's such a potential flashpoint. Let's say Christ follower.
Yeah.
But this is not the first time this has happened, guys. It's going to happen. If you say yes to Christ and no to Satan, no to the works of the flesh, you're going to get hammered.
Yeah. It's such a cope that people do, is to think, well, we could just play the semantic games.
Yeah.
And this is something I'm writing right now, because there was a critique of our book that the American Reformer ran by the guy who runs the Capstone Report. And it's a good guy. I think it was a good faith critique. Which honestly, very first critique of the book that we've had by someone who is genuine, someone that actually believes what they're saying, and it isn't just ideological and like, you actually read the book. And so I'm working on a response to it, but that was one of the critiques is, well, we shouldn't use that term because that's the label they've given us, and we should come up with a better term. And it's like, well, whatever you do, if you oppose the left, if you oppose the regime, they're going to give you some smear that you're not going to want to be called anyway. Right. So it needs to be. I mean, one of the best things that Trump did, really, I think a pivotal thing, and doesn't get enough credit or attention, is, I remember there's a nice GIF out there of it, but the reporters are like, Ilhan Omar thinks that, or AOC, or one of those idiots says that you're a racist, and Trump, without missing a beat, is like, who cares? Who cares? That's the attitude you have to have. Is they think they're calling you a Christian nationalist, you're a domestic terrorist. And it's like, who cares what they think?
Exactly.
Who cares what they call us?
One of the things.
Maybe I am. Who cares?
Yeah. Well, it's like, okay, do you have an informed opinion? I kind of doubt it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of a dialogue where you haven't even put the time into exploring what the issues are in the first place.
Arguing is a negotiation, right? That's what you need to understand. Like engaging in argument with somebody is saying, all right, you might have a point, and there's going to be some give and take here, and we're going to come to some kind of synthesis or some kind of agreement. Maybe we agree to disagree, but there's going to be some agreement at the end of the day. And that's what an argument is. It's a negotiation. But you can't negotiate with someone who is not operating in good faith. Yeah, so that's the first lesson that has to be learned, is these people are not operating in good faith. Make fun of them. Mock how they look or something. Maybe that's much more productive than arguing with them. Maybe
we can be more like Elijah on Mount Carmel and use the kind of language.
Or Jesus with the Pharisees.
Right.
These are guys who are not operating in good faith, and he calls it for what it is.
Right. It's hypocrisy because, again, I always talk about people being self-reflective, look in the mirror, plank in your eye, but it's more than that. These are often people that are bound and determined. Their intention is to tear down any semblance of fidelity to scriptural revelation, to the Lordship of Christ, to reality. And I think this comes back to your small town point. People are still operating as if it was 1965, and I know there's always bad times in every year.
Yes.
But this is when you could go to the neighborhood barbershop, kick back. If you're a little kid like me in 1965, you'd pick up a comic book or Life magazine, and all the guys are smoking cigars and pipes. There's 3 chairs waiting for your haircut, and you would just talk and hang out, and everything's cool, right?
Yep.
That's small town America. When I see, Mayberry RFD, Andy Griffith.
Yeah.
Floyd, that takes me back,
Yeah.
Things are not as they were. And here's the thing.
No.
As a reformed, diehard card-carrying, post-millennial pastor, what other option do you have? Right?
Yeah.
And you have to do so with the power of the Spirit behind you, with the centrality of the Word of God. I was just talking with, I interviewed James White yesterday, and he was talking about Jeff Durbin and the way he can just be consistent confronting people in the State House. Because he has nothing to lose and everything to gain. The presupposition is strong with this one,
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of it. Like this year, the Minnesota legislature got taken over by the Democrats, and they're extremely radical ideologues here in Minnesota, and so they realized they finally have the chance to steamroll the state to get to pass whatever their agenda they want. I mean, they've done everything they can. They have not held back on anything. And the very first bill that they proposed was allowing every possible form of abortion, every
Right.
contingency, minors without parental consent, right up until birth, everything, partial birth, all of the stuff, right?
Yeah, we were aware of this.
And it horrible. And so the very first committee hearing in the Minnesota State Senate was being held, and a friend of mine runs a pro-life organization here, and invited me to address the Minnesota State Senate subcommittee.
Yeah.
And I did. And I didn't go, and I got, I think they gave me 2 minutes or 90 seconds to speak. And so I wrote something up and thought, all right, well, I'm used to speaking for 50 minutes, but I'll try to do it in 2. And I didn't go there with arguments about how this is a human life or any kind of, anything like that. I didn't go to try to persuade them at all. Like
Right.
there's no point in trying to persuade. These are hardened people. And so what I did is I read Psalm 94, part of it, and about God's vengeance, and said that you think you won an election and that gives you power, but you are spurning Almighty God, and his wrath will be poured out upon you individually and our state because of what you are doing here today. And that's the kind of argument. I mean, it's not an argument. It's just flat out preaching, telling them this is
Right.
like declaring this is what's going to happen to you. This is what's being done in our country. And God is not mocked. There will be a response from Almighty God, and it might be the doom of this nation. We might all be dead because of what you're doing, and we deservedly so. And so, it's like, and it's funny because so many people are like, well, you can't say that. I mean, some people freaked out about, what I said, because it's like, oh, that's not very winsome. That's not very, like, you're not gonna persuade anyone that way. And it's like, you've been trying to persuade these people for 50, 60 years now, however long since Roe. It's not working.
Yeah, how's that working out?
It's not working out for you. You
Right.
need to be aggressive. And this is my whole thing. I mean, this is the book. I'm going to have a book out, this summer. It's been coming for a long time. Everyone's at, when's the book coming? When is the book coming? This
has to do with your Twitter handle, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. That's the name of the book, the Boniface Option. And it is a handbook for aggressive Christianity is really the theme. How do you, as an individual, what things do we need to do? What idols do we need to smash in our own lives?
What oak trees need cut down?
Yeah. And how should we live in this anti-Christian world, right? How should Christians live in a world that explicitly hates Christ? How should we live? Should we just be, meek and gentle and try
winsome,
to be so nice? We're just going to nice everyone into the kingdom. That was the strategy of neutral world, right? That was the Taylor strategy. It's just, if we're really nice, then all of these people will see how nice we are and they'll want to be Christians. And it's like, no, they don't. They don't have any desire. They're evil and they hate you. That's you're not going to nice them into the kingdom that way. You have to oppose them. You have to stand strong against them.
Right.
And so that's, the big overarching theme of the book is, well, what stuff should we be doing? What should we be doing differently? What should we emphasize? I mean, some of it is, Christians just need Christian men in particular need a permission slip to be men, right? To be men, to be aggressive, to not be weak, to see a Jesus that's like that. I mean, the thing is, like, you read the Gospels, and I'm sure you do this when you preach. You don't. I mean, everyone has this mental image of just this sweet and gentle Jesus that's so nice.
Yeah.
And he's just the shepherd of the sheep, and he's just petting the little lambs.
What a nice guy.
So nice. And when you read the Gospels, it's not that way at all.
No.
I mean, it is a guy who is preaching the wrath of God on Israel that refuses to believe. That here, God has come in the flesh to them. He's doing all these miracles to prove to them that it's him, and they refuse to believe him. They refuse to repent. They refuse to listen to him. And so he unloads on them. That's the Jesus in the Gospels. And that's the world that we're in now. We're in a post-Christian America that has rejected Christ. And so that we need to adopt the same strategy as Jesus. So
you believe that America could go the way of all flesh, Ozymandias, tremble before me, and yet you remain staunchly postmillennialist in eschatology.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes, I do. I mean,
Absolutely.
and I think we have to. I think it's because nations rise and fall. I mean, there are all sorts of empires and nations that don't exist anymore. That they all thought they're going to last forever.
Yeah.
And ours is just like any of them. You know, there's nothing. I mean, America is a special place. America is. It has this glorious heritage, this glorious Christian heritage from the very beginning that God has blessed us so immensely here.
That's right.
And we are just throwing it all away.
We're shaking our fist.
Yeah.
We won't obey your law. We can do better than that.
We can do whatever we want. We won't obey your law. And not only will we not obey your law, we won't even. We think we can remake reality.
Yeah,
Like that's the world that we're in today. Not only does God's rejects the creation that God has made.
Yeah, right.
Insane.
Forget the second book of God's revelation, the perfect propositional truth. Off with the first one too. The book of nature, the infallible. There it is. Yeah.
I mean, that's worse than any. I mean, people always want to make. I mean, you see this. You've probably seen this. James Lindsay character. That says, well, it's just wokeness is just communism. That's all it is. And it's like, man,
dude, it's the power to name.
Stalinism was more in conformity with reality than wokeness. Like they weren't chopping the testicles off little boys in the Soviet Union, and calling them girls.
Shot in the back of the head. Okay, that's bad.
But I mean,
however,
that's just brutal. I mean, at the end of the day, it's brutal politics, and that's the way of the way the world has always been in a fallen, sinful world. Is power being wielded by wicked men. But this is something totally different. It
is being imposed from the top. This isn't an organic movement at all.
No
one
least.
thinks. And you've seen the footage of the crazy alphabet soup stuff and the grown men gyrating around. Who's in the audience? It's 80% white women.
Yeah.
Man, no offense. My wife is white and a woman. I love her to death. But that's the demographic. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, listen.
Are you familiar with the affluent female white liberal?
Oh, I am not.
That's an acronym. Yeah, you should be familiar with.
Is it you millennials version of the WASP or something?
Well, it's kind of. I mean, it's much worse than that. It's these rich white ladies that want to be trendy, and the trendiest thing to do is turn your little boy into a little girl.
It's just it's so bad, and yet Jesus is Lord.
Yeah, we have hope.
What a radical statement. And you know what you said about taking this into the state house, into civic life. You're exactly right. I couldn't agree more. Vodi Bakum once said, if you had 20 minutes in front of the entire student body in Yale, what would you say? And that's his intro to Acts 17.
Yeah. What
you worship in ignorance. I'm going to tell you about that. Now there's winsome for you.
Yeah.
Right. Well, listen, exactly. Andrew, we probably ought to tie it up. It's been, we're getting into giga dividing line territory here, but, listen, it was great to speak with you. And, tell you what I'll do. Let's whatever information you have on your upcoming book, let's share that. I'm going to share the information on the current book that you and Andrew wrote. Plus, maybe we can get all of your contact data and, where we can find your writings. We'll put that in the YouTube channel as well when we upload this.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I don't have a published date yet. Everyone's like, "What date is it coming out?" Because there's a few projects because I'll publish it. We're going to publish it with Gab because it works so well. The first book things, and so we don't have a date yet because we have other projects that are on the front burner right now. But the plan is this summer. I really wanted it to be June 5th because that's St. Boniface Day.
Be great.
Perfect. But that's probably not enough time to really aggressively market it and prep it and everything that need to be done. And it's not our first rodeo. We know what we're doing a little bit, how to set the margins. we are more just because there's a lot of stuff, a lot of content that is really good that our people need. That's the need of the hour. I think is beginning to get Christians, materials and put ideas before them to show them that there is hope, that it's not all is not lost, that we can win, that there are tens of millions of us in this country that believe in Jesus, that love our country, and we can win with tens of millions.
Real ways that we can obey Jesus and at the same time affect great change in this country. It doesn't have to be the majority.
No, absolutely not.
That's the lie.
They didn't do this with the majority. That's the thing.
That's
they didn't.
Right. That's right.
The majority always voted against the things that they did. I mean, California, for instance, voted against gay marriage.
Yep.
California, 20 years, not even 20 years ago. It's like, what? So it's the ideas that we have are much more popular than people realize. There's so much intense propaganda to make people demoralized and think that you're the crazy one. And so some of it is just getting evangelicals, conservative evangelicals, to realize you're not the crazy one, that you're not a bad person if you say TWXYZ.
Elemental P.
And if you say those things and believe those things publicly, that you to do, you want you to stand for the truth, stand for his word, and stand for it everywhere that you can. Of
stop listening to those so-called evangelicals that are wise.
Yeah,
stop it. I'm older. I'm encouraged less and less of you folk, that is young people who are Christians, paying much attention to the big houses. The Christians. Guess what? They're going to go the way of all flesh too. Jesus isn't. And by the way, the gates of hell will not prevail against the church of the Lord Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. What a fun ride. Tim Bushong for Eschatology Matters. Everyone check out Andrew and Andrew's book on Christian nationalism. It's excellent. And get ready for the new one, the Boniface Option. All right.
Thank you.
Later, Andrew.
For having me. Thank you. Thanks. See you, Tim.